Now I know this sounds like a very weird topic, but hear me out. I have a story behind this. So if you haven't already noticed, I'm a big Mass Effect fan. I've had these here posters for quite a while. I had a shirt that I was looking for yesterday and I couldn't find, which I think that I threw it away before I moved up here. And I have this little N7 sticker on my Pebble, and just about everything else I have something N7 related on. In my car I have N7 stickers and an Andromeda Initiative sticker, and I had one on my helmet too when I was riding motorcycles. But anyways, I've been a big Mass Effect fan for many years, since I discovered the game, which was actually during 2012, which the first Mass Effect came out in 2008 if I'm not mistaken. So I was a little bit behind, but the way that I discovered the game was not necessarily intentional, but it somehow became to be a big point in my life, a transitioning point in my life. So the backstory. I went through depression around 2009, or at least I like to think of this period as when I realized that I was experiencing depression, 2009 to 2012. So it was a couple of years. So in high school, I graduated high school in summer 2010. I had my select few set of friends that only a few of them actually knew what I was going through. I wasn't necessarily willing to express to many other people. So, beginning college, I wasn't necessarily the most social person. I found it a little bit difficult making friends and being out there. And it wasn't necessarily an intentional thing of me trying to make friends or that I felt bad about it. It was more so, just a lot of times, by the time I got out of the classes, I would just kind of dive down into studying. The significant point of that is because looking back, I like to feel, or at least I think that depression for me was a result of a feeling of loneliness. It was a result of a feeling of being out of place, and it's one of those things that I think high school can do to a lot of people. It can do that to a lot of young kids, and it definitely had its effect on me. When I started my semester of college, as I said, I found it difficult making friends. As time went on, I got closer and closer to what I'd call the darkest point of depression for me. And that was a period between 2000, well, not 2000, but that was a period between around December of 2010 to maybe 2010, well, December of the next year. The scariest part of these years, the scariest part of that little time period was that there were many nights in which I didn't necessarily feel that I would make it to the next day, and that was the scariest part for me. I was very scared that I would not live to see the next day, and the reason behind this was because I knew that I had the ability to do something to myself that could, I guess, sort of end it all, if you want to say it that way. So I was very scared of what I would do, or I was very scared that some night or evening I would find it so difficult and I would not want to continue, and I would be conquered by it. So I was afraid that I would not necessarily see the next day at during some periods. So that went on for about over the course of a year, and there were several nights in which I found myself sitting on the side of the road, a dark back road or something, with a knife. And being in the country back in Alabama, it was not uncommon to be around a lot of weaponry. So, hunters in my family was a common thing. So I was around, guns and stuff as well. So, there were several nights in which I found myself with one of those, and I guess I was just too afraid to do it. One of the main things was, despite the fact of, how I felt that, me doing something like that, me committing suicide, would affect other people who care a lot more than, it would cause more pain on them than I was going through. That's how I felt about it. I didn't necessarily discover until a couple years later that my mom sort of had an idea, or sort of felt that something was wrong during this period, but she didn't necessarily know how to approach regarding it. And actually, one of the things was, I remember this speech I was going to give in high school, and I sort of talked about, I didn't necessarily reference depression, but if you had saw the words of what I had, if I find it, then maybe one day I'll share it with you guys. If you had saw those words that I had on there, you may would have thought something was wrong. And my mom had found that at one point, and I guess she didn't necessarily want to directly confront me about it, but of course, that was something that had become a concern for her. So I started thinking about those other people around me. Like I said, specifically my mom. How is she gonna feel if she had witnessed the suicide of her son? And me and my mom are very close. I have so many characteristics of both my mom and my dad, but my mom and we sort of connect very closely, personality wise. So that was something I couldn't do. It was both the fear and the fact that I did not want to leave that on my mom and the other people who cared about me. So as time went on, I've gotten past that hardest part, and 2012 was the year that was the transition for me. This was when I guess I had survived long enough through what I was going through, to the point that I was still close, or I was still volatile. Something could have happened that could have tipped me over again, but I guess I had continued to go on, and I had continued to occupy my mind with other thoughts, and started to question the purpose of life. I began to ask that question quite a lot. What was my purpose of life? What's the purpose of life? That's what I was asking. What's the purpose of life? Which is something that I discovered actually just recently, perhaps a year ago, that is not necessarily the purpose of life. It's the purpose you decide to give to your life. And that is what I discovered for my life that, recently has completely been a transitioning factor. But looking back in 2012, it was around March that my brother had purchased Mass Effect. I'm not really sure who gave him the idea to purchase this game, or because it's maybe he was just being experimental, because it didn't necessarily fall into the category of games he typically play. And so he purchased Mass Effect 2. We had PlayStation 3s. So, of course, this was sort of new to us. I think it was the first year that a Mass Effect had came out for Sony. So he purchased that game, and within like 2 days, he told me to try it out, because he said he didn't like it. He said that he tried it out for about 2 hours, and he didn't like it, which of course is a very small period of time, but hey, that's what happened for him. And for me, when I tested it out, within 2 hours, I was hooked. Probably within the first hour, I was hooked. I was already fascinated with space. I spent a lot of time. I didn't necessarily study astronomy or anything like that, but I was always one of those stargazers. I loved going out during the nights and just staring out into the stars, and just dreaming and pondering what it will be like to be out there. And so I had already had I guess you can say, a connection with space and nature in general. But so I played this game and I was hooked. I was absolutely hooked. Actually, I think it was during the summer. The game came out around March, and Mass Effect 2 came out around March. No, actually this year. Yes, I remember now. 2012, Mass Effect 3 had just came out, and he had purchased Mass Effect 2. And this was the beginning of summer. I was hooked to that game, and just about every night I was out for summer break. I was, during the days I would go out and work with my dad, help out around the yard and the house and everything. I was trying to get a job during that year, as with the rest of the years, but unfortunately that didn't happen. But so I would go out and help my dad, help around the yard. We live on a farm, so there's always something to do. So that was during the day, and I would work out and stuff during the evenings, and then at night when the house got quiet, I stayed with my parents in the spirit. When everything was quiet and everyone else was asleep, I was just playing Mass Effect. I was just getting deeper and deeper and deeper into Mass Effect, and I had developed a love for this game. And the whole crazy part about it was that actually Mass Effect 3 like I said, Mass Effect 3 came out, and so fortunately for me, I was able to jump straight from Mass Effect 2 and import my, the data on into Mass Effect 3. Mass Effect 1, of course, wasn't out during this time period. It didn't release until that December, if I'm not mistaken, for Sony. So they released this bundle, a Trilogy bundle. So for the first time, PlayStation users could play Mass Effect 1. So So, anyways, so I was able to jump straight to Mass Effect 3. I remember on Mass Effect 2 though, at the end of it, during the suicide mission. For you guys who are familiar with it, this was the first time I had ever been so connected to characters that I had actually, I had actually probably shed a tear. I had watery eyes because some of my teammates had died during that suicide mission, and like I said, that was the first time I had ever felt that sort of emotions for a game. And it was pretty serious. So I jumped straight. I went out and got Mass Effect 3, continued, played it, and loved it. Of course, there's a lot of talk about the ending of Mass Effect 3. Overall, I enjoyed it. My first playthrough, like I said, for you guys who are familiar, Shepard did not take the breath, so I was like, oh crap. And then I went and played through it again, and he did. So I figured out that maybe some of the decisions I had made and those lost characters I had in Mass Effect 2 had probably had an effect on that. So, the thing about this, why Mass Effect was so significant for me, it was a way for me to sort of escape. It distracted me from life. It distracted me from my problems, those negative emotions that I had, and it allowed me to truly engage in something different. It further boosted my passion about space. It further boosted that because then after I played this series, I started thinking, what if there's stuff like this out there in other universes or galaxies that we may not know about, other life forms that are probably flourishing and have good sources of communication and all that sort of stuff. What if this sort of stuff is out there and we just don't know it? My mind just went nuts. And I ended up playing the trilogy several times. Like I said, I think it was around December that they released the trilogy pack, and I picked up. So I downloaded Mass Effect 1, and I played them all over again. But it's just, the game had a huge effect on my life. It was just that escape from reality. And nowadays I don't necessarily look for that escape anymore. I like to enjoy reality. If anything, I would love to be able to travel to space one day, even if it was just, into orbit around the Earth. I would love that. I always tell people all the time that I would take a one-way trip to Mars. I would be down for that in a heartbeat. Now, of course, I don't have the money for that now, but hey, if the opportunity came in the future, I would absolutely take it. There's just something very fascinating about space, which is why I also, it's a little side note, why I also support, just about everything that Elon Musk does. I know he's working on many different projects, but I love hearing about SpaceX. I love what they're doing. Of course, I guess with being in the U.S., you would expect NASA to be taking a huge initiative, and perhaps they are, but I haven't really been keeping up with them. But I absolutely love SpaceX. But that's a side note. But anyways, like I said, the game, Mass Effect, the trilogy. If you haven't played it, I highly encourage you to play it if you enjoy anything space related. Like I said, for me, it was a huge factor in my life. It helped me transition from that period of depression into, I don't know, I guess it just distracted me so much to the point where my mind started focusing on other things. And after that summer, I returned to college, and I had some difficult times after that, but it was never really the same. And for that short time period, I like to tell people that I didn't, because expectations are one of those things that can really get you in a lot of trouble. So I didn't necessarily accept that I didn't necessarily say that I had completely defeated depression during this period, but I said that I wasn't feeling victim to it. I wasn't, sort of in its grasp. So for me, that using that method, if anything were to happen, I wouldn't get to that point where I was like, oh, I thought I beat this, and then I'm back into it now, and that's gonna make me feel worse. I more so felt that, hey, I've distanced myself from this a little bit. I can possibly still, go back, but I've climbed out of this very dark hole that I was in, and I guess I managed to get out of the event horizon. Perhaps that's impossible, but I don't know. But at least for me, with depression, there was a transforming year for me. So the game had a huge effect. I think that happens for a lot of people. Perhaps it's different things, and maybe it's not games, maybe it's movies, or something motivational that you discover. Usually, I think it's something that you love. When you discover that thing that really gets your heart going, and you're passionate about it, and it just sparks your interest and your curiosity. It can be that distracting factor that you need. But anyways, that's all I want to talk about. Like I said, great trilogy. If you haven't played it, and perhaps you should check it out if you still have those older consoles or PC. Hopefully they release the trilogy on the newer consoles as well. I would love to play it again. But yeah, it was a great series for me, and it was very beneficial to my life in a way. But anyways, that's all I want to talk about, guys. I hope you've enjoyed. There will be lots more to come, so stick around. Talk to you next time.